Hi everyone, thank you for joining. Going to have a few people trickling in at the start, so we're going to just start with a poll that will come up on your screen. And if everyone could just answer the poll, that would be perfect, just as we're starting while people are joining. Perfect. So the poll, the question is, do you have a preference on whether you prefer a startup or a larger organization within pharma? So the options are startup, large organization, and I have no preference. Feel free to just, vote as you join. Perfect. What would be, from a perspective of everyone on the panel, what would be your preference if you were voting on the poll?
It depends on when and what point of my career you would have asked me the question.
Right now.
Right now, I've deliberately joined a startup.
Yeah. What would you have said if it was, say, 5 years ago?
5 years ago, it would have been startup.
Yeah. What's changed for you so that now you would be more open to, well, now that you would be open to working in a startup?
I think it's having a certain amount of sort of experience in different roles to make more sense of the complexity of the startup, but you tend to have to wear many different hats.
Yeah. Okay, so you feel like the experience you have, you're now ready for the startup environment and I guess the pressure that comes with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Rahel, what would you say personally?
Well, personally, I started in small organizations, so I moved from smaller to big organizations. But I think in my heart, I can see myself in the future, similar to Leon, to go back to a startup and again, be more broad and use all the knowledge that I gathered in the last years as well. So for now, I still enjoy the large organizations very much, but I guess in the future that may change.
Soon enough, you might be tempted.
I might be.
Perfect.
And what I think is that a rich career in pharma life sciences, you should experience both, actually, to have a very full-fledged career and experience both the big and the small pharma, because I think in both environments you can learn a lot. So I would say both, really.
Yeah. And I guess you get a perspective as to which one you do prefer, or which one would be right for you throughout your career. So no, definitely different for every single person. But yeah, perfect. So we do have the results from this poll. So it's just a few people as they were joining have voted, but it seems that, interestingly enough, a lot of people don't have too much of a preference, and the rest of people have said startup. So maybe they're at the point of their career where they are now looking for a challenge. But no, welcome to everyone who has just joined. Yeah, we did kick off with a poll, but for anyone that would like this to be subtitled, please do enable Otter AI plugin at the bottom of the screen to be able to watch this with subtitles. But yeah, with the poll as well, it's quite interesting because the biotech industry is booming, and a lot of biotech startup companies have risen within Switzerland. In 2016, the biotech industry altogether was worth around 369.62 billion, and is definitely continuing to increase. So it will be really interesting to see how this will impact Switzerland, and how the results of maybe the polls later in this conversation will actually influence this. But yeah, thank you for joining us today. We will be discussing the clinical market in Switzerland and relevant topics to the industry, where we will debate kind of popularity of startup versus pharma and a lot of different topics within clinical. Today, as you can see, we have a really interesting group of panelists that have worked in a range of functionalities across different life sciences companies, all having had a different perspective throughout their career and really pushing boundaries as to what possibilities are next. So we'll have an hour of panel discussion with a live question and answers at the end of the session. So feel free to also join the networking session afterwards as well. Yeah, my name's India. I will be the host and chair for this webinar. I'm sat in London right now, but I do specialise in the clinical market within Switzerland. Yeah, we want to make this as engaging as possible. So if you have any questions for myself or for our panel throughout the webinar, please do just put them in the side panel, or just do enter them in the question part. And then we can kind of touch upon them when we do have time. But yeah, please do note this will be recorded and will be uploaded to our BioTalent Social YouTube channel. So if you have anyone that has missed this or would like to watch it afterwards, then you will also have access to that. But yeah, firstly, I'd like to introduce you to our really interesting panel. So yeah, if you could kick it off, Anne-Marie, and yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Anne-Marie de Jong-Shermans. I'm currently a non-executive board director in the biopharmaceutical industry, most recently at Pharvaris. My favorite thing about Switzerland, originally being from the Netherlands, are the mountains, because you don't have them in the Netherlands. And I love going into the mountains, and also now that it's very hot, it's a great place to be, I can tell you. Thank you.
Especially right now with how hot it is, so
it's a bit better, yes.
Yeah, pretty ideal. Perfect. And Leon? I think you're on mute, Leon.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a Dutch theme here, because I'm also originally from the Netherlands. The mountains are indeed a very big draw. I'm a passionate skier, so that works a lot better in Switzerland than it does in the Netherlands, I have to say. So a little bit about my my role and place of work. So I'm currently Director of Clinical Operations with a data science startup company called Volve Global, and we specialize in bridging the diagnostic gap for patients living with rare diseases.
Perfect. And then save the best till last, Rahel.
No pressure. So my name is Rahel, and I'm Associate Director for Syneos Health, which is a CRO. So we support our partners with clinical trials and clinical resources as well. My favorite part about Switzerland, I'm Swiss with partially Dutch roots, so closest to Loop here. I really enjoy the mountains as well and go hiking, so I fulfill a bit of the stereotype, but I also enjoy very much, and also right now, especially like the rivers and also all the lakes to go swimming. So I really love the nature and especially the river at the moment.
Perfect. It's interesting how everyone somehow linked together. There seems to be a common theme. But yeah, kind of kicking it off with kind of one of the topics. So yeah, the Swiss economy has ranked first in the world of the 2019 Global Innovation Index, and fifth in the 2019 competitiveness report. And it definitely seems like there's no signs of slowing down, with companies actually looking to start in Switzerland or actually expand within Switzerland. So yeah, why would you personally, Rahel, say that Switzerland is a favorite location?
Yeah, I think it truly has to do with the available candidate pool for companies. So also given that it's a reasonably small country, that makes access to that, so they can decide Switzerland, but they don't have to decide so much where exactly in Switzerland, because you know the ways are pretty short. And then I think also to attract people to come here, I think the quality of life that people have in Switzerland surely plays into that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think a lot of the time when I do speak to people, when I touch into the German market a little bit, a lot of people are consistently open to relocating to Switzerland, or it's a location that they would definitely consider later in their career. What would you say, Leon? I saw that you've worked in a range of different locations. Yeah. What would you say personally drew you to Switzerland?
I think it's very much a combination of factors for me. The geographic location is probably for a European citizen is probably second to none. You're right. I started my career in the Netherlands in a local affiliate organization for a large pharma company. But I did desire the global experience, and I had the opportunity to move to the UK with the company I was working with at the time, my sort of alma mater company, Zeneca/AstraZeneca. They offered me great opportunities. So I went to the UK. That was originally going to be for 18 months, turned into 6 years. But then a combination of factors that made me reconsider. One was I wanted to diversify my experience, but the other was a location thing. I was very keen to move back to the mainland, and Switzerland is simply ideally located inside of Europe. It is well connected to most other places. I think that's one of the explanations for why it's such a favorite location for international pharma professionals. It has that wide offering of career opportunities because there's a high density of different companies, both big and small, and the location is it's easy to get to and get back to where you came from Switzerland.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I saw that you also worked within Germany.
Yeah.
A lot of people do commute from Germany to Switzerland as well. What would you say was the comparison between working in Germany and working in Switzerland?
Oh, very, very different. I think I can only speak for my personal setup and situation. But if you look at Switzerland, you have a real pharma life science hotspot around Basel. Sort of mixes in with Zurich, and then you got in Swiss Romand, the Lausanne, Geneva area. There's a lot on offer, and none of these places are very far from each other. So there is a significant cross-company expat community that you can be part of if you want to. In Germany, you bar the Munich area, you do not really have such a significant hotbed. There is the Heidelberg area, where they've just opened a new biotech park, and there is indeed startup life sciences, but it is not mixed in typically with these large or mid-sized pharma companies that provide stable footing. I think there's a big difference. And then of course you got the UK, you got the southwest around London. There is this whole sort of ecosystem geographically of a wide variety of companies. I think that's the big difference between what you can find in Germany. You can find great companies there, but they're a bit more sort of like than in isolation, not so.
Not so linked together, I guess. Okay, no, definitely. And I think following on from why it's so favored is also there's such a big pool of talent within Basel specifically. So yeah, Anne-Marie, why do you kind of think that this is something that Basel's become so popular?
Yeah, I originally came to Switzerland as a PhD student, and I think what attracted me, I was studying at the Swiss Institute of Technology in both Zurich and in Lausanne, were the great research facilities, great communities, but also a very good connection with the industry. So actually, I did my PhD and I did diploma work and projects at Novartis. And then I worked for a long time at Novartis in Basel. But I think the research, the universities are fantastic in Switzerland, and they are very well embedded in the ecosystem. So there are very good connections between the universities and the companies. And I think this is something that serves you well when you are a student, but also when you're later on hiring. So for example, I always tried to have trainees doing diploma work in my department to keep that interaction going. And that was also a great hiring tool, actually. So I think that is one of the things why Switzerland is great, is also the connection between industry and academics.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes an impact, and we are seeing a lot of big companies popping up within Basel specifically. Would anyone else think there's any other reasons why Basel's now become so popular?
Maybe I can chime in. I'm currently a bit in between jobs, but I used to work for Sobi, a rare disease company, up till July. And we would actually have an office in Basel because it allowed us to attract great talent. So it was also a strategic move to have offices in Basel in order to attract top talent. So I'm curious what the others think, but actually there are companies coming, for example, to Basel rather than another place in Switzerland with maybe the same tax benefits, but they would prefer Basel because of the access to talent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a snowball effect, right? Because there is already much, it attracts even more. So
yeah, I think that's a very good point that Rael makes here. You get some sort of like gravitational pull at some point, but it's not exclusive to Basel. You do see it at the Biopol in Lausanne. So my background picture is the Biopol in Lausanne. That's where Volv's offices are. Volv deliberately located there because of its proximity or its nearity to the EPFL. So the core of our business is around data science, AI, and EPFL is simply world-leading university. So our latest hires in the data science team are from there. And that was one of the reasons for the company to go there, was because of that talent pool. Apart from the mountains and the lakes. so that's where Lausanne is probably better than Basel, because it's still a bit of a way from Basel to go skiing.
Conveniently next to your favorite thing.
Yeah.
No, I think from a business perspective, it's also so smart to assess kind of the talent, what type of talent, and pretty much where your office would be most beneficial to be located. But yeah, having spoken to all of you at different times, I think not a single one of you has taken a kind of traditional route as to what to do next. So I did think it would be quite interesting. Would you think that it's better to specialize or have a cross-functional career? I know, Rahel, you've worked within a range of different roles within one company, so it'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think I had not necessarily different roles. I think I had just coming from a smaller company in medical device with like 2,000 people worldwide. Your role is broad because there's just not many people doing in the team, right? So a project team can be me, myself, and I at that time. So I think that's a very valuable experience, right? To be very broad. And get the chances to, a lot of opportunities to grow as well, because there's just not so many specialists there. So you get to do things that maybe are a bit outside of your standard scope and job description. But then on the other hand, I feel like also going into a bigger organization, it was also nice to have the specialists where I could learn from, right, and collaborate. I may not do the job, but I learn from them still in project teams, etc. So I don't really have a preference what is better or worse. I think both has its positives. For me personally, I think it helped me in my career starting in a smaller company, but I guess it really depends on everybody's path.
Yeah, it's very, very different from person to person, but it sounds like it's definitely had a positive impact on you. Yeah, and I know, Leon, you've recently moved into kind of the digital space, more focused within AI. Was that something that you always kind of imagined yourself doing, or was it as a result of kind of specializing or having a cross-functional career that you realized this was a possible next step for you?
It's probably coming to think of it, it's probably more to do with not specializing. I always look at my own career as jack of all trade, master of none. So not very specialized. more generalist. I've always been attracted to know a bit about the different disciplines. So that's why having much of my career born out of clinical development, study management, clinical operations helped, because you're not really a specialist in that area, because at some point it becomes more a role in which you're orchestrating the team, and you have to understand enough of the medical side of things, enough of the science side of things, enough of the logistics side of things, enough of the regulatory side of things to make it all, and these other functions, to make it all dance together. That is probably also why at one point I decided to leave that arena, because I was interested in learning more about some of the enabling technologies in the space. So that had me leave pharma DevOps or CleanOps and went into more enabling solutions for that space. And that's resulted in the role I am in now, which is a highly specialized company doing very highly specialized things. It's very, very focused. But it is my diverse background and experience that is what is needed there now to bridge back the very high specialty thing what they do, to translate it back into where in clean dev or clean ops or just a whole development life cycle, commercial life cycle in pharma, can you add value with that very specialized thing that Wolf does.
Yes, and it's interesting that you didn't need to be specifically specialized in that to have an input. And like you said, because you had done so many different things, you still had a lot of experience that would actually apply to the role. And I know, Anne-Marie, we'd spoken about previously in terms of when you are looking for a role, it's so important to not just have the one title of the role, but limiting factors and different responsibilities. How do you kind of all fit this into just one position? So would you say that you're now looking to specialize, or now looking for kind of more cross-functional responsibilities?
I actually have had a really cross-functional career, and I must say that was very much possible in big pharma, in my case Novartis. So I have been working in a lot of different functional areas, and I think that has prepared me to go into smaller biotech. I worked in Biogen and in Sobi, and now lately I've started taking on board roles. So I think having a very broad background helps you to get them into more general management. But I think every career is unique, and even if you want to plan every step in your career, it's not always in your hands. There is also a need that comes up, and then you jump in that position. You just happened to be there, and sometimes it's a move you've planned with dedicated training, education, etc. But I would say cross-functional is definitely great if you would like to become, in the end, more broader and more general management.
Yeah, and I think departments are always changing. So sometimes if you're not so specialized, you do have a little bit more job security as to what you can do next, or what companies would be a possibility next. So yeah, no, it definitely does have a big difference. And we're going to launch another poll. So this poll is, what is the biggest difference between pharma and biotech? So I know when we had our first conversation about this, it did cause a little bit of a debate. So it'd be interesting, maybe, Leon, if you kick us off and what your opinion now would be on what is the biggest difference between pharma and biotech.
I'm not so sure if there is so much of a big difference anymore these days. I think traditionally the big pharma was about chemical entities, chemical molecules that were cooked, so to say, not in a Winnebago somewhere in the desert in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but in the labs. And the biotech was typically biological products as a medicine. But with all the mergers and acquisitions, a lot of those companies have become biopharmaceutical companies. So I'm not so sure what the difference is nowadays.
No, it's interesting you say that, because I know we did have quite a little bit of debate about it, and it's quite interesting when I'm speaking to people. A lot of the time, when I do say, "Would you prefer to work within biotech or pharma?" It seems to be very popular right now that everyone wants to work within a biotech, whether that be a large biotech that already has quite an influence within Switzerland, or whether that be a startup company. So yeah, Rahel, what would you say would be the biggest difference for you?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one indeed, and I made some thoughts as well, and I'm not that much further, but I think for me, I always felt that biotech is always closer a bit to research, often closer to the universities, etc. There's a lot of spin-offs that come there, and I think that then also represents a bit the teams that are in for smaller biotech and not for the big ones. So also leading a bit through the talent stream, often through biotech, then going into bigger organizations like pharma. So that's how I look at it a bit, right? So it can be a great start for someone in the industry to go to a small biotech and then sort of transition. So for me, a bigger focus on the research part.
Yeah. Okay, no, perfect. And it's interesting that you say that. With the results of the poll, it seems to be 75% of people have said the products. And then we have an equal amount of people saying funding, leadership, and pricing.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Anne-Marie, with that kind of the biggest difference would be products, or would you have a different opinion?
Oh, I mean, it's really interesting because I've worked in a big and small biotech, and I've worked in Novartis as well. And I think what Leon and Rahel said, often biotechs are actually acquired by big pharma, but also big biotechs acquire small biotechs. No, so in the end, you're all in the same dance in a way. But my experience is that the smaller the biotech gets, the more risk taking, I would say, and I think there is more agility, and that's really speaking from my experience. When I was in big pharma, I sometimes felt I was in a big tanker, and to change course was really tough. Whereas in biotech, you can navigate much quicker. You also make bigger mistakes, but then they are just also corrected much more quick. So there's definitely changes, differences in leadership as well. And I think it's a lot around risk-taking, agility, innovation. I didn't see any answers on the patient centricity. In my personal experience, I thought that the smaller the company, the more close to the patient. So for example, in Biogen, my assistant would know exactly what type of clinical studies Biogen was doing at that time. There was huge attention for what we were investigating, what we were aiming for. And I think the smaller the company gets, the closer you get to the patients, and in my view, also a very high engagement around patient centricity. But that didn't show up in this poll. So maybe the other panelists have some opinion there, because for me, that has been a big difference. Yeah.
Somewhat, but I don't think it travels uniquely with the size of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're talking here is maybe less whether it's technically speaking pharmaceutical company or biotech or a mix of the two. I agree to a degree. I mean, once the company gets really, really big and has a big portfolio of products, any one employee in the company will find it difficult to get their head around all of the therapeutic areas and specificities of the patients. But I've seen really, really good examples in big biopharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical companies where the patient was really central to what the company was doing. We've also seen that in smaller companies, but I do agree, or by and large, I mean, when you're in a smaller company, big people are across the different roles are really, really focused typically on the one or two or three lead indications and and how these indications play out in the real world of people living with those diseases.
Yeah, and kind of following on from what you said, Anne-Marie, you mentioned kind of a difference within the leadership positions. What would you say would be specific about the leadership positions in a startup bio or pharma firms? And would you say there's any requirements if you were looking to work within a certain type of company?
Yeah, great question. I really think that the smaller the company gets, the more hands-on you have to be. And you have to be rather close to the details. You really have to understand it very thoroughly. Whereas in a bigger company, simply because it's bigger, there is much more of a division between very strategic and very tactical operational, where I think the smaller the company gets, people have to switch between strategic and tactical all the time. And that's not for everyone. It really depends. But I would say leadership has to be a bit more hands-on in a smaller company.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Rahel, I know you started off your career in more of a startup company, and in terms of leadership, you do have a lot of responsibility within your role and responsibility within hiring also for leadership positions. So what would be your opinion on kind of specific requirements to certain companies?
I think Anne-Marie nailed it with the hands-on. I feel also that you may, if you start in a startup, even in a leadership position, you may start also without a team, right? Usually the department that was just created is yourself. So you may, if it's, if you're heading R&D, you may have to be for a while also an engineer and work on that. So I think this openness has to be there. So you really have to be very technical and know the things, but then also keeping this balance that Anne-Marie said, to also work on the strategic part and potentially also build a team. So I think that can be nice as well, a great experience to sort of be part of this growth with the company. But I think it also adds some challenges that you may or may not like it as well.
Yeah, no, and I think sometimes it's good to be challenged, and if when you're building out a whole department, you can be quite proud of what you do achieve. Would you say that's similar to what you're doing now, Leon, in terms of kind of having an influence within a new company, new environment? Are there certain requirements that you think are kind of necessary to what you're doing right now?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Wolf's current organization in Switzerland is on the ground in Switzerland is 5 people and a dog, literally. We have our chief well-being officer actually has 4 legs and is crucial to the well-being of the team. But the team has to chip in everywhere. So I'm actually, because I just got back from the US this weekend, I'm at the moment still in Germany with family. But the rest of the team is busying themselves putting together desks, because we've moved into bigger offices. So apart from being brilliant data scientists and the founder CEO and they're all now putting furniture together. So that's sort of like roll up your sleeves and stick in kind of mentality is really what it takes in a startup-y kind of environment. So yes, but one moment we were like blue sky thinking, where do we want to go in 2023, 2024? And the next you're literally just putting together an IKEA desk and then everything in between.
Sometimes I guess you need a sense of unity. All you need is to put together an IKEA desk.
Correct.
Perfect. And kind of following on from your experience, touching upon innovation and kind of digital health, what do you think is kind of the importance of digital health, and what specifically does that mean to you right now?
So I think digital health is a real big ticket item, and AI in health and the promise of AI in health is something that's been talked about for quite a few years, and I think we're really now at a turning point where that is starting to sort of actually deliver. I see that in the field that we at Volvo are working in. but probably also in some of these other fields. Also, the general ecosystem that is required to enable digital health solutions is moving in that direction. There's various national initiatives to try and really combine and access digital health records better, to make it accessible for secondary healthcare research, population-based health research questions, and managing healthcare cost. You see this discussion is popping up left, right, and center, and there's national, countrywide initiatives, there's Europe-wide initiatives. There's a lot happening in that space. There's also a lot of companies beginning to work more and more in that space. So I think we'll see a lot of breakthroughs there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that is definitely going to become more important. I know when we discussed this previously, you also said the influence of kind of COVID-19 and how that's forced a lot of companies to kind of take on board digital health maybe a little bit quicker than they had expected. So do you think that this will continue to have an impact, or most of the impact from that has already been done?
It has. I think if I just make a distinction between the sort of the typical digital health technologies, where typically when you talk about digital health, people are first line probably thinking about Fitbits and these kind of things. You track at a more personal level what's going on. It's all digital health data, and it gets leveraged. And then at a larger scale, there is the kind of things that Volve is involved in, and some other companies, is AI in health, machine learning and artificial intelligence in health, where you typically leverage big data, and you're looking to use the big data, big health data, electronic health data, to obtain new insights and accelerate diagnosis, obtain new insights in biology of disease, or expression of disease, or prevalence of disease, you name it. It translates into health economics and outcome research, leveraging digital health technologies to look at outcomes at scale from the digital health data that is amassing in ever bigger volumes at the moment. But then there's also the whole in life sciences, particularly in clinical development, the operational side of things is the e-enablement of clinical research and development. There's a lot of talk about the e-enabled clinical trial, the virtual trial. And that area has definitely been accelerated big time in COVID, simply because it was getting less and less practicable to visit those sites and do everything you did, both for the patients visiting the trial site, as well as for typically the CRAs and other staff to manage that in a central location, the trial site. So that e-enabling of the clinical research arena, that is definitely accelerated in the last 2 years, and I don't think that's going to go away. I think that is here to stay now. I think also patients will be asking and demanding that much more now.
Yeah, and I think even kind of touching upon that, now people working from home, it's such a normality for people to work from home, whereas before a lot of companies that weren't so flexible, things like that. And Rahel, what would be your opinion on kind of the importance of digital health, and has that impacted you in any way specifically throughout your career, or has it more so been from an outsider perspective as to what potentially could be done?
Yeah, it was, for my career, it was not necessarily gradual, right? So I started in a company that had already quite a lot of enabled systems available that were digital, but then moving companies also sort of went back to paper a bit. So that was a strange experience, to be fair, and I didn't really think that I would encounter that. But to be honest, it just, going back and understanding the challenges again that it have, it just, pushed me much more how important it is to sort of keep that track. And I definitely think, but Leon said as well, that COVID has accelerated massively, really put in some force. And from the clinical operation side, I must say, I think that a lot has happened during COVID with different strategies, which I really appreciate to see, to be honest. So there's been a lot of movements, a lot of companies transition to different systems, making their integrations of the different systems they use more efficient as well. So that's definitely a benefit.
Yeah, and would you say that COVID is going to have a continued effect on this, or it's pretty much done what it's going to do?
Yeah, I think for me, I would call it the new status quo with that. So I think it's something that we have to be ready with situations that can occur in a similar manner. So I think companies are more ready by now. And I think that will continue. So I think that has been a big impact for everyone. So no one will take the risk to not continue moving more in the digital side.
Yeah, no, definitely. And kind of following on from that, Anne-Marie, would you have any kind of perspective on digital health? How has it impacted you kind of throughout the midst of lockdown and COVID?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the need to have digitalized systems, but also interconnectivity between systems, between your ERP, your regulatory system, and your quality system. Those things have become really indispensable to be able to operate offsite. So paper-based became really a bottleneck, even though it was sometimes there. I also see more and more combinations with products, with apps coming out where data is being gathered about the correct administration or the values to steer the drug administration. So I think you see it really everywhere. So you see it on the commercial side, but you also see it in the backbone of the company. And definitely COVID, I mean, has been an enabler. And I mean, lucky that from some perspectives, it was a lucky event that we could speed up those projects. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of a lot of products now having apps as well. Do you think that will be a big innovation that will become more popular over the next few years? Or is it something that if companies aren't doing, they should be doing? What would be your opinion on that? Would that be something that you'd like to kind of work with personally?
I think it has become a differentiator, especially talking about patient centricity. So the apps are usually worn personally, have personal data. So I think it's a differentiator in the market, and it will become more and more normal that products have something that comes with it, which collects data but also informs the patient to use the product in the right way.
Yeah, no, and I think it's like you said at the start, it's all about kind of getting a little bit closer to the client and the candidate, and having that kind of rather than having interference, but everything flowing and being able to have that communication. So you really feel like you're part of the whole trial. But yeah, Leon, would you say that there are any other kind of innovations going on right now that will have an influence on the market, or anything that companies could be doing?
I think the track that we're talking about is going to be here to stay and probably going to increase. I think it's going to be. I think one of the shifts that I would imagine we're going to see is a bit more emphasis on patient-reported outcomes. And I think digital tools and technologies to capture the patient-reported outcomes are invariably much better in capturing those outcomes in real time, and you can monitor them. So that they are going to be, I think they should be digitally enabled.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if anyone's got a first-hand perspective on it, it would definitely be you. And I know when we last spoke, we kind of agreed to disagree a little bit on this point. But from a recruitment perspective, me personally, I do think a lot of markets right now are quite candidate driven. With a lot of people having multiple offers on the table and clients having to be more of in a negotiation standpoint to secure the top talent. But what do you think? Do you think the market is candidate driven? I think I know your answer already.
My first answer, I think, is definitely that it's candidate driven, but I may be biased just for my current situation, having hired quite a lot of candidates, brought them into the company and being richly faced with that challenge, right? I think it definitely changed also in the style, but I think that applies not necessarily if it's company or client driven, but also the interview process. I think we really moved away from the way doing interviews years ago. So it's really more both-sided. So you sell yourself, not just the candidate is supposed to sell themselves. So for me, that's what I try to do, to really sell the opportunity, the company. You have to do a lot of marketing. So I think if you're hiring candidates, you have to have a bit of a marketing skill as well. And some roles, specifically in clinical operations, there's just been such a big need, also increase in need actually because of COVID, going back to that, right? It has been really, really challenging. And I definitely say for, clinical research associates specifically, I would say it's very candidate driven across Europe.
I'm sure everyone else has a lot to say about that. What would you say, Leon?
Since we last spoke about that topic, I think I've revised my answer a little bit in that, I think it depends very much on the role and the level you're talking. I think typically in your typical clinical operations role, I don't think that is generally candidate driven. I think there are a lot of candidates out there. So I would say it's probably more a bit of a market driven on that, but there's always exceptions. Depending on the level of experience that you're looking for, it may very well be candidate driven. And I'm a case in point in that I had an offer on the table for a senior clinical operations role, and I had said yes. And then I had to retract. I had to apologize profusely to the company that hired me, and I didn't join them in the end because after I'd accepted, things moved with Volve where I am now. That had been a conversation that was on the boil, but you know what it is like with startup companies. It takes time before they reach a point where they can hire, and then so the timing of that was just a little bit unfortunate for the company that wanted me in a clinical role. But I think those are individual cases. I think it very much depends on what roles we're talking about.
Yeah, a little bit kind of varied in terms of what we discussed previously, but I think there's just so many different markets, and right now so many different companies hiring or candidates looking, that there's definitely not going to be just one perspective. Anne-Marie, what would your perspective be, the final deciding point for the debate?
I think it's difficult because indeed candidates have a lot of offers at the same time. There is a time, a moment. It's not easy, but I think definitely recruiting companies should be very close to the candidate and understand where the candidate is and be really close. I think the centricity is really important because that will make a difference to take a decision to join or not to join. I think that engagement part is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think definitely understanding someone's motivations. And at the end of the day, companies are looking for people from a long-term perspective. So it's very easy for a company to be hiring for a range of roles, but it has to be kind of ticking boxes on both sides to have an impact within the company. And kind of in terms of like a recruitment process, I know when we first discussed today, we kind of touched upon diversity, inclusion, I know Switzerland is home to 6 of the top 20 universities within biosciences, over 14 internationally recognized research institutes, a little bit like you discussed, Leon, earlier. And yeah, more than 1,000 research groups. So do you think that this has had a positive impact on the access to talent? And will this also create kind of more of a diverse pool of professionals? What would your opinion on this be?
Definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, my answer is clearly yes. This is also how I got actually into the life sciences industry, through the academic connection, which happened to be strong with professors having networks in the industry. And I think it's something that also during your career, through traineeships, study projects, this link keeps going on. So I definitely see that this is not just for career starter, it's also later on that these networks are very vital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know, Rahel, you also mentioned when you are kind of working and interviewing people, and there is a sense of conveniency with the universities, or even with people coming through the university. So yeah, what would your kind of opinion on this be?
Yeah, I think for us, I think it's a great pool of talent that you have, and sort of automatically you get sort of a diverse group from people all over the world. So, which I think is really beneficial to a team, in a global team as well in Switzerland. And for us, I think it's not just the universities itself, it's also the other research facilities like university hospitals, specifically for the clinical operation parts, where people may start their career after a PhD to work in the research unit before clinical trials, and then with that being interested to actually move to pharma and the industry. And I think that's made it very easy for pharma to also get these talents. That's a great pool. They come with some experience already, with a great research background, and I think that's really nice for companies to be here. So that's a great pool of people.
Yeah, and kind of touching upon that as well, I know, Anne-Marie, you came over during your studies. Do you think that from kind of coming over from your studies that influenced you to stay in Switzerland, or if you had favored another location, do you think that you would have relocated?
Difficult question, but I think because it was sort of seamless, I didn't even think about it, and I think that also the example from Rahel, like that PhD students stay a bit in the university and then move on. I think because it's so seamless, people are not even considering to change country again, because it's just like natural transitions almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've not considered it. Yeah.
No, it definitely is. It's a good thing that you came to study in Switzerland. So it's perfect. And Leon, I know you kind of mentioned this earlier, but with Volve, that they specifically are located next to the mountains, but also next to a specific university. So do you think that it's quite common for other companies as well to consider universities in the location that they set up, or is it just a bit of a lucky convenience?
No, I think companies have their own list of wishes, I think. So for Volvo, there was a combination of factors, but since we're in the digital health sector, obviously the EPFL was a major factor, but we're also located in the digital health hub at the Biopol. So we're not the only digital health kind of company. So there's an ecosystem of startups and digital health kind of companies, and then there's a university, and then you're in Switzerland. So there's lots of a potential client base around. So those are the typical factors, other than obviously all the fun stuff we've talked about, like skiing and swimming in the lake. Those are from a where do you settle as a company kind of perspective. Those are obviously very important, and then there is definitely also the taxation kind of things. Now, I cannot speak to in how much that played a role for all, but I do know for some other companies that I've worked for, most notably the company that set up shop in Boudry in Canton Neuchâtel, that was a very good reason for them to do that. It did, however, come at a cost. It meant that they had to hire anybody in from a bit further afield, because there wasn't really anything in Boudry other than, well, close by was Philip Morris. But that meant that everybody you needed to hire in as a company had to go either from the Geneva area or from the Basel area or from abroad. So that did result in an interesting mix of the population. So where you sit can really determine. Now that was probably an extreme example. You don't get to see such a skewed initially mix that I've seen there in I think in the Basel area, for instance. So it is quite important, I think, if you're particularly for a startup company. We don't have to talk about the larger ones that are already settled. But startup companies, it's very important where you position yourself, because where you position yourself immediately has an impact on where most of your immediately accessible talent comes from.
No, definitely. And Rahel, would you kind of agree with Leon with this point?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really important to see also in terms of languages, I think also for startups, right? You have to keep in mind not every startup is global. So if you're more in a research group that you collaborate that is French speaking, you may want to make sure you're also located in the French speaking part.
Yes.
When your direction with collaborations more goes to the north to German universities or universities also within Switzerland or ETH in Zurich, then you may stay in the German speaking parts. I think that's also important to consider. Also to attract candidates, because it makes a difference where you live, right? So learning French, learning German, both has pros and cons. I'm not going to go into that, but that's just an important factor that you have to consider as well, right?
Yeah, and definitely will be a big factor if you are looking or when picking between different companies. And as kind of I know this has gone very quickly, and that's kind of like a finishing question. What would you say would be your hopes for the future of clinical market in Switzerland? We'll kick off with Rahel.
Well, I think we see a lot of organizations that are in Switzerland, that have roles in Switzerland. So I hope that's going to continue within the clinical areas. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities for candidates, but also great opportunities for companies, as we've seen the candidate pool. So I hope, honestly, that still more companies come to Switzerland. We see also more companies coming from the APAC region, which is interesting, China specifically. So I think that's the next thing that's going to be really interesting.
Perfect. And Anne-Marie, what would you say would be your hopes for the clinical market?
I mean, that it keeps prospering and that it becomes even more international. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like that's going to stop anytime soon. So I think we're all good. And pretty much, Leon, would you say pretty much the same thing?
Yes, I think Anne-Marie and Rahel brought it to the point. I think we acknowledged earlier that I think by now there's such a critical mass that has its own gravity. Plus, I think Switzerland continues to be a real global talent pool because of its universities. That's here to stay. There's lots of funding coming in. There's lots of companies that provide high knowledge economy employment. Switzerland has successfully maintained its image of a clean, safe place to be, and I think it's interesting the point Rahel made. So we do indeed now see the influx of the large Chinese corporations that are leaving China, and they have indeed, for their European market, decided to set up shop in Switzerland, in Basel predominantly. So after starting off with their offices in the US, now we are on the next wave of offices being set up. So two very big players indeed chose Basel for that, Switzerland, and I can't argue against that choice. I think it's a good place.
from a business perspective, I guess it definitely makes sense. They're all popping up in the same space. But yeah, no, thank you everyone on the panel for taking with this time to speak to us and discuss all of the different topics. It's been really interesting kind of hearing all of your insights, and thanks to the audience for actually participating. We do hope that you can join us for our next webinar, whenever that will be. So definitely watch this space and RSVP for the next one. But for anyone that does want to continue the discussion further, you'll see that we've put in the chat a link to one of our networking rooms, just to chat to our panel freely and pretty much just dive deeper into any of the topics covered today. So yeah, feel free to join that link now. And then, yeah, we'll see everyone that wants to kind of continue this discussion also in the networking session. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending on both sides. And we'll definitely see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, India. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect.
Thank you, India.
Thank you.